They travelled to the Emirates today. Last season, the Seagulls all but ended Arsenal's title hopes with a 3-0 win. Paul Barber joins us, and I'm sure he remembers that fondly. Morning, Paul.
Morning, Sean. Morning, Henry.
Morning, Paul.
You do remember that fondly, beating Arsenal?
I do. As most people know, I grew up as a Spurs fan, so it was a particularly good day for me personally, but most importantly for the club. I think it underlined, what a great job Roberto and the players have done, and were doing last season, have continued to do into this season. So it was a great day for us.
Now, before we get on to more about Arsenal v Brighton, Paul, Tom Lockyer's collapse yesterday, which forced the abandonment of the Luton Town game, but Bournemouth, I'm sure you'd wish to send your best wishes to him, and also it probably resonates with people at Brighton because obviously Enoch Mwepu had to retire just over a year ago after he was diagnosed with a potentially life-threatening heart condition.
Yeah, well, first of all, our best wishes from everyone at the club to Tom and everyone at Luton. I mean, I think, what we witnessed yesterday, what those people in the stadium witnessed yesterday was awful. Awful for Tom, for his family, for the players and staff that were at the stadium, and obviously all of the fans. But it does just show how important highly qualified medical staff are around high-profile sports teams and elite athletes, and also in the stadium itself. I understand there was an incident earlier in the stadium as well where a fan had to be treated. So it was a very, very difficult day. But hopefully with the medical attention that Tom received right there and then and will receive now over the coming days, we can help him get to the bottom of the issue that he has. But, these are unfortunately some of the awful risks that high-profile athletes take.
Paul, your experience at Brighton pre-season, all your players must undergo extensive medical tests. I just assume that's de rigueur in the Premier League.
It is. Regular heart screening is very much part of the routine of the medicals, and each summer, of course, all of the players are effectively tested from a base level to understand their fitness, having been away on holiday and so on. And all the way through the season, we're doing daily checks on their well-being, not just from a physical point of view, but from a mental point of view. And if there are any warning signs, any sort of markers, we get them checked out as quickly as we can with specialists. So, what has happened to Tom is obviously very tragic, but I know that he'll be getting the very best medical care.
Yeah, but Paul, just sort of moving to events on the pitch, and obviously everything is overshadowed by what's happened to Tom. But just looking at Brighton, the way you operate, just looking at some of the players who have moved on from you, they haven't always succeeded. You could say managers as well. What is it about what you have, the DNA? Is it your staff? What is it about Brighton that makes it such a good platform? And then some players who go for big fees elsewhere, Cucurella, whoever, don't always settle in so quickly.
Well, I think first of all, we have a very clear vision for what we want to be, and we work every day towards that, not just on the field but off the field as well. Other clubs have that. It's not unique to us, but each vision and each way of operating will be unique to each club. I think the environment that we try and create gives players the opportunity to succeed, partly because we give them time to get to the levels that they need to get to. We try and put as much support around them as we can, particularly if they're coming from overseas. They're coming to an entirely new country, new league, new club, new community, new friends. It's difficult. And, you can't expect, in our case, very often young players to settle quickly, and particularly into what is the toughest league in the world. So you have to be patient. You have to have coaching staff that understand there's going to be some kind of transitional period. And I think the same is true even when those young players move on to other clubs. If you look at the players we've sold, Marc Cucurella, Moises Caicedo, Yves Bissouma being good examples, they're all still very young players who are still learning their trade and still adjusting to their environment. And any transition, I think, is gonna mean time, and that requires patience, and it also requires an understanding that not every transition is going to work quickly. And there's families to think of as well. Families need to settle as well as the player. And in my experience in the game, the more settled the player and his family is from a community perspective, from a family perspective, if there's children, from a schooling perspective, the better their performance on the pitch. But sometimes that can take a little bit more time than the managers and coaches and clubs and supporters would like. But it still has to happen. And I'm sure, because all of the players we've just mentioned are excellent players. Yves Bissouma has been playing fantastic football for Spurs this season, but it took him a while to settle there and find his feet there. Marc Cucurella has been in and out of the Chelsea team, but is an outstanding player. And we all know about Moises Caicedo. We know what a world-class talent Moises is. So I'm very sure that in those three examples, just as Leandro Trossard, who's a bit older than those players, has done so well at Arsenal, they're all going to settle very well in the end.
But Paul, the track record of Brighton is remarkable. I mean, when you sign some of these players for like 50p or £1, and then you end up selling them for ridiculous fees, do you ever, when they come in, think, I tell you what, this fella Cucurella, he's going to make us 50 million. Caicedo, he's going to make us 100 million. We're going to be quids in.
I wish it was that simple, Sean. We'd be doing it every day.
But it feels like you do.
No, again, it's a credit to the recruitment department, to the way they operate, to the diligence that they put into every transfer. It's not just about what we see on the pitch. It's about the way those players conduct themselves off the pitch. It's about the people that they surround themselves with. It's about the advice that they get from their own agents and their families. And again, it's about making sure that we buy at the right time, at the right level. And then when they come into the club, have the right development plan for them. And sometimes that development plan means that we push them out on loan to other clubs in other leagues and sometimes other countries. Sometimes it's about working with our under-21s. Sometimes it's about staying with the first team. Sometimes it's a combination of all of those things. And eventually they get their chance. I remember Moises Caicedo got his chance, ironically, at the Emirates Stadium a few seasons ago when Yves Bissouma was out. And Moises came in and did a fantastic job, and from then onwards had that wonderful season with us before he moved to Chelsea. Sometimes it's about timing. Sometimes it's just about the timing of the player coming into the side, and it might be when the pressure's off. It might be because there's a particular circumstance, injury, suspension, where the player comes into the team, has to come into the team at that time. And of course, it takes a coach who believes in playing young players. And fortunately, we've got Roberto who does, and we've had Graham Potter who did. And those players have prospered because of that.
Paul, you've got a player like Evan Ferguson, who obviously a lot of people are coveting. He's so committed to you. Every time he plays, every time he talks, he just seems so embedded in Brighton. What is it, again, about the culture? I mean, is it De Zerbi? Is it the staff? That players who probably know they're going to move on in 18 months are so committed?
Yeah, I think it's a combination, Henry. I think it is, obviously, in this case, Roberto. Roberto has this incredible charisma, this incredible personality that gets the best out of every player, and more probably in some cases than they believed was possible. You then have the support staff around Roberto who tend to be sort of fairly contrasting characters to him, and provide that extra level of support to players, because every young player goes through good times and bad times. You know, Evan will go a couple of games without a goal. He might not be in the game as much as he would like to be, but he'll be reassured by Roberto and his staff that that's okay. You know, that there is still a big contribution being made, and it's being noticed by them. And then there's the player care staff that are, you know, not coaches, not technical staff as such, but are providing that additional support that a young player needs, particularly if they're away from their home, their parents, their friends and family. It's important to make sure that they're nurtured as much as possible off the pitch as well as on it. And I think what that does is it breeds trust and confidence from the young player and the family and the advisors around them that they're being looked after. And there's also, I think, a belief that when the time comes, we're not a club that's going to stand in the way of a player's progress. If we think it's right for him to move at that time, and it's also right for us, and it has to be that combination. You know, we don't just sell players when it's right for the player. It has to be right for the football club as well, and that might mean timing in terms of money. It might mean timing in terms of where our squad is at that particular point, or where our team is, or what our prospects are. And we have to make sure all those things come together. We're not afraid of standing our ground and saying no. But at the same time, young players who come to us and who are with us can look to many, many examples of players that have worked through the pathway, worked with us, and their agents have worked with us, and then they end up in the place that they want to be. So I think all of those things combined give us that environment that makes it work.
It's not just players, though, is it, Paul? I mean, Graham Potter left. You replaced him with Roberto De Zerbi. You've mentioned many times that you prepared for life if De Zerbi moves on, but I mean, who on earth would you get next time around? Is there a better man out there to do the job that's being done at the moment?
Well, that's the challenge that we have, and I think the problem for us in our model generally is that the better we do, the higher profile we are, the higher profile our players are, the more sought after they are, the more sought after our coaches are, and if we can stay in the upper levels of the Premier League, obviously the gap between where we are and where we could get to is narrower and narrower, and therefore the people coming in to replace those going are harder and harder to get, because we're not able to pay the kind of transfer fees or salaries that some of our bigger rivals can pay. But we work really hard to scour the world for the best young coaches as well as we do for the best young players. And Roberto and Graham Potter were, hiding in plain sight, if you like. They were both, doing great jobs in other European countries. And we kept tabs on them, we kept markers on them. And then when the timing was right for us as well as for them, we were able to bring them in. And, there will be another Roberto or Graeme out there. It's just up to us to find them. And obviously that's part and parcel of what we do every day with our succession planning.
Paul, you're known as a voice of reason within the Premier League and much needed within the meetings. When you go to those meetings, and whether it's the Big Six or whoever, is there a concern about the European Super Leaguers and their plot resurfacing?
Well, I think there's always a desire from some clubs across Europe, not necessarily in England, to create something that is better than what they've got. And I think everyone looks at the Premier League and envies the success of the Premier League. But the one thing that drives that Premier League success and the wealth that comes with it is, of course, the competition. And the more competitive and the more compelling our league is, and the football within it is, then the more valuable our league is, and therefore the more valuable the clubs are that are in it. So there's a real responsibility for all of us, all 20 clubs, to make sure that we recognise that we protect that we protect the English pyramid as well, because that is another important factor that makes English football as popular and as valuable as it is. The ability to go, as we did 25 years ago, almost going out of business at Hereford, all the way through the pyramid to, in our case now, the Europa League, is a great example of why the English system is as good as it is and as exciting as it is. And every club, no matter where they are in the pyramid at any one given time, should have that opportunity to dream, and for their fans to dream, and for that dream ultimately sometimes to come true. And we want to protect that. We must protect that. It's absolutely vital that we don't lose sight of the one thing that actually makes English football special. That's our pyramid, and that's our system. And it's also our competitiveness and the ability for any club on any given day, as Crystal Palace did yesterday, to come back from 2-0 down at a fantastic team like Manchester City and get a point. And that's the incredible value that English football has, and that's why broadcasters, not just in the UK but all over the world, crave our matches, and it should continue like that.
Paul, we know you've got to get off to a fans forum. That's obviously important to you. What do they tend to ask you about? Is it ticket prices? Is it kick-off times?
Oh, everything. Everything. I mean, the one thing about Fans Forum and the one we're doing in North London today for a few hundred fans is you don't know what's coming. It's quite scary. There's no script. There's no preparation. I mean, you could get a question about the transfer window. You could get a question about Roberto's contract, about the chairman's desire to carry on supporting us in the way that he has, or it could be about cold hot dogs and warm beer. You just don't know. And that's what makes it a lot of fun, actually, as well as quite scary.